Mehdi Hasan. I have wanted to feature him for so long. He is one of my two favorite guys on corporate media. I got just a little teeny tiny taste of corporate media. I was a local news guy. There's a lot more separation from the titans of industry. When you're in a local news station, you are an affiliate, and it doesn't matter. Like, the point being, I can't even fathom the pressures you are under when you are on a national news station. But Mehdi Hasan speaks the truth regularly, consistently. If he's not, if you do watch like MSNBC and you don't watch Mehdi, do yourself a favor, check him out. And he is talking about a simple question, which we've been asking here for quite a while. That is, at what point does the GOP denial of right-wing terrorism become complicity? Why is it important that this is playing on corporate media? Because it reaches an audience that needs to hear this. Badly needs to hear this. The title of this stream is Americans Are Fed Up with GOP Terrorism. When a segment like this appears on MSNBC, you know things are getting serious. Here it is.
The shootings started almost a month after Election Day. They began on the afternoon of December the 4th in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when a gunman fired 8 rounds at the home of Adrian Barboa, a Democratic county commissioner. 4 days later, on December the 8th, multiple shots were fired at the home of Javier Martinez, a Democratic state representative. His garage was struck and damaged by the gunfire. 3 days after that, on December the 11th, another Democratic commissioner, Debbie O'Malley, found her house peppered with a dozen gunshots. And then earlier this month, another shooting. This time, at least 9 rounds fired into the home of Democratic State Senator Linda Lopez. A month after the 2022 elections, as lies about voter fraud continue to swell in far-right media, after years of threats to election officials and to civil servants, police were on the hunt for an armed gunman targeting Democratic officials. And now they say they have their man. Meet Solomon Pena, 39 years old, a convicted felon who already spent nearly 7 years in prison for burglary, larceny, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and who made a failed run last November for the New Mexico legislature as a pro-Trump Republican candidate. Police now say Pena paid 4 armed gunmen cash and, quote, sent text messages with addresses where he wanted them to shoot at the homes of local Democrats.
This goes even deeper, and if you saw the previous stream we did on this guy, you'll already be aware. But let me just pause it there, so you can really get a sense of how serious that is. He is accused of financing terrorism. The definition of terrorism is attempting to achieve political goals through violence and intimidation. Violence or intimidation. Paying people to shoot the homes of Democrats, to do drive-bys. That is financing terrorism. If this story had happened in 2015, that would be the only thing talked about for weeks on cable news. This is one of many stories these days. That is how destructive Donald Trump's presidency was.
Most of whom Pena had confronted at their homes after he lost his election bid in a landslide of 47 points. Because according to police, quote, he had complaints about his election, felt it was rigged. He approached all of these commissioners and the senator at their home with paperwork claiming there was fraud involved in those elections. To be clear, this guy's explanation for losing by 47 percentage points is fraud. Of course it is. When his election conspiracy theories went nowhere, he not only paid those gunmen, allegedly, to hit the homes of Democrats, police say he participated.
On the last shooting, we now have evidence, too, that Pena himself went on this shooting and actually pulled the trigger on at least one of the firearms that was used.
How? How did an apparently disturbed ex-con, whose felony record might have made him ineligible to serve if he was elected, how did this guy even end up as a Republican candidate for state office?
All right, so there's a reason we talked about Santos earlier. George Santos is how. The Republican Party, as in the actual group of people that make up the GOP officials, do not care about quality of candidates because they do not care about quality of legislating. So this guy, who a simple background check would have disqualified in the Democratic Party, at least, from running for that seat under their name. It doesn't surprise me at all, that he got past whatever lackluster procedures they had. All you had to do to be, or all you have to do to be a Republican politician right now is have enough social media followers, say insane enough things, and run defense for corporations. As long as you're saying the properly corrupt lines, they don't care who you are. They have zero ethics. This is not at all surprising. But I'm delaying the best part. I do want to just say, it was a great. Zix points out it was a great couple of nights ago when Mehdi preceded Ali Velshi. It may have been the first time two practitioners of Islam anchored two shows in a row on a major news channel. I had not considered that. That is a win. Honestly, that is a win. I'm glad that parts of us of this country are getting to a point where a thing like that can happen and go unnoticed. Isn't that a nice place to be?
Well, when asked about that by a reporter during the campaign, Pena responded in a text, quote, "I stand with Donald J. Trump. I don't want anything to do with you."
For the record, I mean, it's cool that A, it happened, and B, that it wasn't such a big deal. Like, on my end, I wasn't like, it's cool. That's what actual progress looks like, and it's God. I hope those of us who care about making strides keep making strides.
In this case, Pena was being literal. He stood with Donald Trump on January the 6th, 2021, at the Stop the Steal rally in Washington, D.C., the one that led later to the Capitol insurrection. Here was Pena on Twitter, proudly posting a photo of himself on that Washington trip. Just last November, a week after he lost his House race by almost 50 points. 2 days after that, Pena posted one of his last tweets.
You remember when we covered Brazil's January 8th? One of the things that they were doing was rounding up everybody, not letting them go, and then later picking out people here and there, and then later letting people who were there and participating just get away because, well, they weren't actually breaking into the building. They were just part of the group that made up the muscle for those people. That's how you handle it. That dude, for a number of reasons, shouldn't have been allowed to run, but the primary should have been that he was too busy being in jail for his participation in the insurrection.
A photo of him in a Trump-autographed MAGA hoodie. Trump just announced for 2024. "I stand with him," Pena wrote. "I never conceded my race, now researching my options." 2 weeks later, the shootings started. It is January 2023. We are 2 years after that insurrection, and we have to have another serious talk about the big election lie, the conspiracy theory that Democrats are stealing elections, whether with Italian satellites or Dominion voting machines or bamboo ballots. It is like every other conspiracy theory, whether it's about the moon landing or Tupac's death, laughably stupid. But it's also very different, because the big election lie is a conspiracy theory that leads to real-world violence. We saw that on January the 6th, and we've seen it ever since. A study last year by the University of Chicago's Project on Security and Threats found that 21 million Americans believe both that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president and that force is justified to restore Donald Trump to the presidency.
Hold on a second. So, one thing that I think he just skipped over a bit there. Let me get myself off the screen entirely. So 21 million Americans. First of all, that is a huge amount of our country. Believe that Joe Biden is illegitimate and that violence is justified. So that right there are all potential terrorist candidates. But the thing that was skipped over is the 46 million that either agree that Joe Biden is not legitimately elected, good Lord, or that violence is justified anyway, that they don't care if he was legitimately elected, but violence is indeed justified. That's alarming.
Believe both that Joe Biden is an illegitimate president
That's very alarming.
And that force is justified to restore Donald Trump to the presidency. We saw pro-Trump incidents of violence last summer in the lead up to the midterm elections, along with warnings that the former president's angry words could still spur real bloodshed. It was a point that was made on this show many times by many of our expert guests over many months.
Donald Trump incites political violence.
And even telling people, if you beat up protesters, I'll pay your legal fees.
That's a reference to a Donald Trump quote that they continue to reference. You know, when the looting starts, when the looting starts, the shooting starts. That was a widely known meme in this space now. That's what's happening.
It isn't hyperbole to say that he's inciting and radicalizing people.
They're playing into the hand of these types of narratives that fuel this extremism that drives political violence.
When Donald Trump said one of the most truthful things he ever said was that he could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and he wouldn't lose any supporters.
Yes. Guess what? A majority in the House of Representatives, including 10 Republicans, agreed with that when they impeached Donald Trump for inciting a violent insurrection to prevent.
Again, as was pointed out by Glenn Kirshner earlier, that is every branch of the government except the executive doing their job. Every branch except. Pathetic. That's where we need to focus a great deal of our efforts. Link in the description, Department of Justice contact. Tell them you expect charges to be filed immediately.
His own loss of power.
If you agree with
Donald
that sentiment.
Trump and his MAGA movement, as we have pointed out on this show, as I have said, as my guests have said, they pose a violent threat to the rest of us. And let me be clear, there are not two sides to this story of political violence in America today. No matter how many tales get spun about Antifa super soldiers and Black Lives Matter and woke armies, this is far-right, pro-Trump violence, and not just against Democrats, against democracy itself. Look, there is one horrible and terrible incident that Republicans always cite, from 2017, when a gunman opened fire on a congressional softball game, wounding GOP Congressman Steve Scalise. That shooter, who was killed by police, reportedly volunteered for Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign. See, what about Scalise, they say. The thing is, Sanders didn't incite that shooter. He swiftly denounced that shooter. And there haven't been a series of left-wing shooters since.
Yep.
That is the truth. Republicans can cynically use the horrible attack on Scalise to try and both sides political violence in America. But here's what's actually on the other side. Let me just quickly run through a whole host of pro-Trump people who've carried out violence since Trump emerged on the political scene in 2015. And I'm not here even counting the hundreds of convicted insurrectionists from January the 6th. Give me 60 seconds. Start the clock. In 2015, there were the Trump supporters, brothers Scott and Steve Leder, who attacked a homeless man in Boston thinking he was an immigrant and told police Trump was right. In 2016, there were Trump supporters Patrick Eugene Steen, Curtis Allen, and Gavin Wright convicted for plotting a series of bomb attacks against Somali Americans. In 2017, there was Trump supporter Alexander Bissonnette, who murdered 6 Muslim worshippers in a mosque in Quebec City 2 days after Trump announced his ban. Also in 2017, there was Trump supporters James Field Jr., who crashed his car into a group of people protesting a neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville, killing 32-year-old Heather Heyer. In 2018, there was a Trump supporter Cesar Sayo, the MAGA bomber, who sent mail bombs to more than a dozen people, many of them prominent Democrats who had been demonized by Trump. In 2019, there was a Trump supporter, Patrick Carlino, who was convicted for threatening to murder Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. In 2020, there was Trump supporter Barry Croft Jr., the last of 4 accomplices convicted of a domestic terror plot that involved trying to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer and spark a violent uprising. In 2021, there was Trump supporter Brandon Hunt, who was found guilty of threatening to kill members of Congress 2 days after the January 6th insurrection. In 2022, there was a Trump supporter, Ricky Walter Schiffer, who was shot dead after he attacked the FBI's Cincinnati field office with a nail gun, apparently because he was mad about the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago. And now in 2023, there's the arrest of Trump supporter Solomon Pena. That all happened. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. It feels like you'd have to be a crackpot conspiracy theorist to deny any of that. And yet denial of all this violence from pro-Trump people, incited by Trump and his allies, remains the default setting for so many GOP officials. At what point do we say the obvious? That denial of violent acts by people on your side, coupled with a refusal to even condemn them, is complicity in that violence.
Boom.
Joining me now are Jared Yates Sexton,
Now, this is a fascinating interview. I might do just like a part 2 of this in a later bit, or rather in a later stream. But what I really wanted was Mehdi Hasan's take there, because he's, dead on. That is exactly the issue, and we're seeing, yes, the standard Republican playbook of whataboutism and blah 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 blah. But complicity has to be discussed. You can't allow these people to get away with supporting terrorists by running cover for them, by pretending and using rhetoric to suggest that it's not a major issue. Especially those people that are like, well, what do you expect when you have stolen elections? That mother effer, the people that say that, should be arrested for saying that. We jump on First Amendment all the time. But just like with the Stop Woke Act, using the very language of anti-racists in order to promote racist ideology. These people in the GOP are also using language designed to support freedom of speech, for example, in order to get away with crimes that stifle people's freedom of speech. The fella shooting bullets into the doors of Democratic politicians because he doesn't like what they say. That's what he's trying to accomplish with that act of terrorism. And us playing at being ultra fair has not been fair. It has resulted in an obvious gap in our defenses, quite literally, and the GOP takes advantage of it. I will do one piece of criticism for Mehdi Hasan there. He asks the question, at what point does this become complicity? And the rhetorical answer, the answer you're supposed to fill in your head is right now. Just say it. Just say it. He's using a Fox News tactic there. I think given the circumstances, it's understandable. I certainly don't know that I could do any better. No, I take that back. I do know I couldn't do better. But nits need to be picked nonetheless, and that is my nitpick. Say this is complicity. Because it is.